ready?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
How do we begin this?
Uh, do you want me to open it or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hey, Rodgers.
Hi, Phil.
So, hey, fellow troublemakers out there. We are talking in the studio today. Uh, Rodgers, our producer, and I, and we just got to talking about this intergenerational phenomenon within movement culture, social movement culture. Um, Rodgers, can you frame this a little bit for us? The kind of question that you brought forth.
I was actually thinking about the values that are within the movement in terms of the intergenerations. For instance, how do the millennials or the generations that came before are able to work with the Generation Z, which are like the people who are freshly into the movement. And these two, they actually have different values. For instance, if we look at the movements that were like organized by the millennials or the generation that came before, they were having certain values. For instance, respect your leaders, like follow what you're told or something like this. Whenever you're in a movement, then there's always that's someone who like people look up to, um that sort of culture. But with Generation Z or the Gen Z's, it's kind of different. It's like you either have what we want, or if you don't, then you do not fit here. Like they will come for you if you do
They'll
not.
cancel you.
Yeah, they will cancel you. We even have that cancel culture right now. So I was just pondering on that, like if these two generations were to work together, what would actually make them work together?
Hmm.
Yeah,
That's a
and
good question.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's no one size fits all, and there's so many contextual considerations. But I think part of it is just like the age that you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Gen Z is a certain age. They're in their 20s, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and you are just becoming yourself, getting into your own skin and forming your own opinions, and you get hot-headed about those opinions, which is not all bad, right? The tenacity and the vibrancy, the passion of many people at that age, including myself. I remember when I was that age, I was so unrelenting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I felt more people should be unrelenting. Um, and I'm not that old, but I'm a millennial, so I'm a
Mm-hmm.
little older, and I'm able to see now that not everybody expresses passion in the same way,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also um, I've developed like a stronger palate to like work with people despite their contradictions, because this is necessary. You're never going to work with a community that thinks where all of its members think exactly like you,
Mm-hmm.
have exactly the same values as you. At some level, things break down, and we can talk about. I mean, the thing of cancel culture, it can go uh, really deep and take us on a serious rabbit trail.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm gonna try not to do that, and I also don't want to like blame Gen Z for cancel culture. They didn't invent it,
Mm-hmm.
and we're all kind of affected by it in some way. Um, I think one of the beautiful things about the subculture of kind of like activism or like movement life is that sometimes you meet people that become your really, really close comrades or even friends or people that you're going to, in some meaningful way, spend the rest of your life with. And not all of those people are always your age. Sometimes you find somebody much younger or much older than you. Um, I think the climate movement is one beautiful example where you have, kids in primary schools, high schools, uh, forming real relationships,
Mm-hmm.
not just politically expedient relationships, but like real relationships with people who are grandparents, people who have been in the environmental movement, which was the precursor to the climate struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, um, and some of these relationships really germinate, and there's like a mutual learning from one another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really tough. I mean, like culture changes so fast these days compared to days past. Technology changes. All these changes happen more rapidly by some measures. And so you would think that the generations more easily get distanced from each other. There are definitely Gen Z family members, friends, people in our communities that I really struggle to identify with. And I look at them and I'm like, I'm not that much older than you, but I see the way you're staring into that phone and I have that judgment of them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have to kind of like reflect on myself and be like, wait, what are the things that they look at me and they just roll their eyes?
Mm-hmm.
What are they judging me for? Maybe I need to deconstruct wherever that judgment is coming from. Um, the fact is, we're in this together. We need to learn from each other. And Dan Glass, who was on, I think, one of our earlier episodes, maybe episode
Action
7
logic.
or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Action Logic. I interviewed him once for an article, and he said, cancel culture is the right wing's wet dream come true.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that polarizes and divides us. The only one who benefits from that are, the billionaires, the states, the nation states, the governments,
Mm-hmm.
the powers that be. Um, so I think, we have to be very tender about generation. And I take that less as a lecture to Gen Z
Mm-hmm.
and more as a reflection for millennials and even a number of my elders in our struggles that whom I really respect. Um, but eldership is like this thing that you earn.
Mm-hmm.
It's not assumed with age.
Yeah.
And I think the toxic so-called elders in our movement that have been gatekeepers and they've clung to their own micro version of power, and they're maybe living vicariously through the movements of today or something. Um, to me, I don't look up to them as elders so much, but then I know some that are really, really present in the lives of young people, including Gen Z, and very curious, and open to learning together with them, to being friends and comrades. Um, and that to me, I always take as a welcome challenge. When I see people with presumably less energy than me, people that have every right to be more exhausted or more fatigued than I am, when I see them conjure that willpower to sit with people that are in their teens or 20s, um, I find it like very, very beautiful. And that's a gift. I would never trade the currency of friendship within the revolution, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase, um, for money or property or any of those other fleeting things that are at the end of the day not so meaningful in life. Um, so um, what do you think, Rogers, about the relationship between millennials and Gen Z?
I really don't know what to think, but I could try.
Yeah,
um,
you're right at the cutoff line, right? You're like a hybrid species over there.
exactly.
No man's land.
I think there is this it's a trend rather where a lot of people, millennials in power, they underestimate what the Gen Zs could do. They think like the Gen Zs have no right to rule, especially over them, and also they have a feeling like the Gen Zs do not have anything to give to power, to development, to construction of our communities. They think our ideas are delusional. At
Mm,
some point, it's like a heaven that we cannot achieve. So for me, that is the take. Although I do acknowledge there are individuals like the older generations, as you have said, like they really try to incorporate learning with their generations. They're also trying to pass down the knowledge that they have, because I think at some point what we are struggling with, it's all these generations being in different islands. Like there is no information sharing between the two. Like there is a huge barrier in between, an invisible barrier that is there, which leads to each generation feel like it's on its own, of which is not the reality. There is some interlearning that is happening, but it's not for many. Just to acknowledge a few, but I think this all comes from a point that many of the millennials and the older generations think that the younger generations have nothing to offer because they are young, they don't have the experience, they do not have the ideas or something like that, which is not true. I think
Yeah.
the Gen Zs actually have ideas. They
Mm,
have ideas, and they are capable. If it is for leading, if it is to bring the change,
mm,
at some point they might need guidance. But how do the millennials or the older generations come to present that guidance? Do they come with a point of suppression? Do they come with a point of encouragement, or do they come with a point of nurturing? If they do come with positivity, then I believe there'll be room for like interconnecting the two generations. But at least for me, for my experiences, whenever I was presenting my ideas, I got people who were like constructive about it, and then I could understand how their point of view and where they're coming from. But if you get someone who is like total opposing without giving you an alternative or without like building towards that idea, I think it's natural. It's natural for mankind to be sour about it, and that might cause that fracture that is available.
mm, mm.
So, do you think the Gen Z is actually delusional?
No, no, no. I mean, we all have our blind spots
Mhm.
historically. Um, whatever moment or era we're born into does socialize us and determine some of those blind spots to some extent. We can rise above those blind spots. I think Gen Z has held the world to account on so many blind spots, Gaza
Mhm.
being one, um, identity politics being another. So, what you said about this presumption that Gen Z doesn't have ideas to offer,
Mhm.
I think the question itself reveals a fundamental inequality in our world because it assumes that the elders have a right. And now I'm using the word elder just to describe the older generations. I should
Mhm.
just be saying the older generations have a right.
Mhm.
The older generation, it's presumed that the older generations have a right to critique whether the younger generations have something to offer.
Mhm.
This is, given the demographics of today in certain parts of the world, a fundamentally um, sectarian kind of, I don't know if sectarian, yeah, sectarian kind of comment. Um, because in many of our countries, like here we're seated in East Africa, most of the countries of East Africa, the median age is very low. And we're talking about some of them, it's even lower than adulthood,
Mhm.
if we're considering 18 the official adult, quote unquote,
Mhm.
adulthood. Um, that means that over half of a population in a country can be officially children.
Yeah, yeah, visual children.
So who is leading that society? Yeah, we know you get older and you get some land and you're supposed to take care of your family and like there's this sort of aging aspect of
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
that does come with some more experience and certain kinds of knowledge. But look at these, now I'll use old people and not elders because they're not elders. Look at these old people in power.
Mhm.
They have completely no clue what's going on. They're asleep in half of the important meetings that are determining the policies that are going to affect everybody younger than them in the country. They're older than 90+% of the population.
Mhm.
They're from a fundamentally different time and they've categorically refused to learn. And they've actually weaponized miseducation to keep people as
Mhm.
stupid as they can,
For them to stay in
for them
power.
to stay in power, for them to concentrate their wealth, concentrate their power. So the assumption that these people have the right to determine whether Gen Z has any ideas to offer, the question should actually be the inverse.
Mhm.
Gen Z should be asking whether these old people have any ideas to offer in 2025.
Mm.
And most of the neoliberal policies around the world that were manufactured during the lifetimes of those old people and implemented to the detriment and abuse of young people today. Those
Mm-hmm.
policies which are manufactured, global policies manufactured before the majority populations of this region where we're sitting right now were
Mm-hmm.
born.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know, none of these Gen Z people chose these policies. They didn't exist
Exactly.
at the time these policies were made. And those policies have systematically done increasing violence to the lives, have impoverished the lives of Gen Z. So it's actually Gen Z to ask the question
Yes,
of the
they do.
octogenarians, you know? Okay, you're almost a century old. You have been in power for half of your life, half of that century, you know? um, what are you going to do for us, you know? Are you going to step up and actually have an original idea?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you look back into history, like a lot of Africans like to look at Thomas Sankara.
Mm-hmm.
He was fairly young for like a person who gets into power, right? There is something about age that we really need to kind of like understand. If we look at many of the 20th century movements that ousted dictatorships, put an end to foreign occupations, we
Mm-hmm.
find university student groups were often at the core of fomenting national level revolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's a given that one of the ingredients is sort of like that college university kind of age demographic gets together and organizes, articulates new ideas, sets agendas. Um, and right now, Gen Z is the one at that age.
Mm-hmm.
I often find myself wishing that as a millennial, I had done more to encourage my younger siblings to have class consciousness. Because I think we also live in a very optics kind of world, you know, Instagram and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not criticizing people who are on social media. I will very eagerly criticize. We have to live there. It actually hurts us if we don't.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for many people, it's hard to like get by without living part of your life on social media. This is the reality that you know, the techno feudalists have constructed
Mm.
for Gen Z and for even for the rest of us, really.
Yeah.
We're penalized for not being there, really. But when you're, you know, living in that constant doom scrolling kind of thing, you're tempted to think that the image, the visual, the thing that catches your attention for like 2 to 3 seconds is the thing that you measure society by. And um, questions around class, of course, there's, you know, you can develop so many visuals around what is class and all this kind of stuff, but it's a little bit of a complicated question compared to like racial justice,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, so I think this high exposure to what is referred to as content, but can often lead our brains into a sort of a sort of flow state. You know, you're just scrolling, you're scrolling, you're scrolling, you're scrolling. You're not really digesting, and even things like a genocide don't really sit with you quite the way they should. You know, you're scrolling through the next thing after the genocide. It's you know, some fashion ad or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your mind is kind of blending, churning this all together in the same pot, at a subconscious level,
Yeah.
even. I think it sometimes um, hinders our ability to really process ideas of power.
Mm-hmm.
And we're tempted to think that like the best reaction to an image of genocide is like, you know, an image of our solidarity or something. But like actually doing the solidarity, actually like understanding how power is structured, actually dismantling that power and establishing a new form of power. I mean, these are like complicated things that require a lot of us. And I think as a millennial, I sometimes am very critical of myself, like, um, for not creating more space with Gen Z to talk about class struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because even identity politics, as it was kind of, uh, let's say, conceived, um, it finds its roots in class struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow it seems to me like there's been a divorce, but I cannot blame Gen Z for that bifurcation of the two. Um, and I can't even just like pin it all on social media. Like, we're also not trying to make these simplistic kind of arguments.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like an anecdote to illustrate the point. Um, but I think that's one of the things that actually needs to bind us together, because 90% of humanity is are working class people. You have the ultra 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 rich, and then you have kind of an aristocracy that maintains the system, so the
Mm-hmm.
ultra 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 rich can flourish. And so then there are these kind of people in society, the doctors, the politicians, different kinds of people that are well to do and have very comfortable lives. They're not the billionaires, but they give an image to the working class, like, you can be like me if you just work hard.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like, that does take us into discussions of racial justice, of anti-colonial struggle, of all kinds of, climate justice, all kinds of considerations. But um, these things are historical. They don't emerge in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And why are they historical? Because big money and big power has been fomenting century after century against the majority of our species.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why intergenerational struggle must happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an imperative. You can't just like only the people that are your age.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually cooperate with people who are unlike you. You have to learn together. Because why? Because you're oppressed by the same system.
Mm-hmm.
Even those doctors and whatever, the aristocracy kind of people, are also oppressed by the same system. They may not feel it the way you do. Um, even, well, I'll reserve that thought for now, because it's not taking us in a productive direction. But yeah, back to you, Rodgers.
Do you know, there's a funny thing that I discovered some few days ago, other months, I'd say. As a millennial, please try to explain this to me. Of course, I'm your fellow millennial, but I do not understand it, and I know it's the system that put this on to practice. Tell me why. Like, my work here, I'm taxed already
Mm.
at certain amount, and if I get any other work outside, it's double
The
the
tax is
the,
double, or
the tax that I'm taxed here.
wait,
So
the
it's like,
tax? Oh, you're saying in Tanzania
yeah,
the taxes are higher than taxes of
no,
another
my,
place,
my
or
secondary work is taxed higher than my primary work. So it's like the government is punishing me for working hard,
hmm.
if you get what I mean.
And yet at the same in the same breath telling you, Rodgers, you have to work hard to making
Yes,
something to make
yes,
something of yourself.
yes. Like what I'm taxed on my primary job is still high there, yeah. And then when I have another job that like they have the systems and everything, I'll be taxed even higher than my primary job. Make that make sense? And I'm just saying this as an example of where the millennials and the Gen Z don't like turn into oil and water. Like
Hmm.
they do not mix because this has been around for a while. Tell me why my father did not fight against this,
Hmm.
or my uncle did not fight against this until I am here, and then I finally get employed and I have to face this.
I can't speak to the specific tax policy, but I'll
Mm.
try my best to speak to the broader um, differences of, let's say, financial experience
But
across generation.
is this different elsewhere? Like, do we have the same thing or is it same?
Well, I mean, there are some countries. Look, they're trying to say that you must be rich because you have 2 jobs, therefore you can remit more. But we know the only reason that you have 2 jobs or 3 jobs or 4 jobs is because you're hustling to survive. Like nobody really like willfully goes out there and is like, "Oh, I would love to work like four jobs, never eat, never sleep, never have a personal life," you know? There are very few people like that, right? And those who are like that, we know they will burn out very soon, you know? um but if we look at economic trends, like how much money do we have versus the cost of living and that kind of stuff over recent history, like the past few generations, we see that for now I'm saying we as millennials, we millennials uh, um, see that our parents had it easier than us. Less debts after university, less needs to like take out, predatory bank loans. Land was easier to acquire, there are all kinds of factors, but globally, the economy has tanked and tanked and tanked with like a few kind of fluctuations and exceptions. I'm not an economist, but with capitalism, things are not going in any kind of positive direction. The challenge intergenerationally in terms of our understanding of each other across age is often that our parents and their parents will look at people in Gen Z with a phone in their hands and say, look, they have all these amenities that we never got to have. Well, they know a way of living life without a smartphone, right? If you're a Gen Z person without a smartphone today, will you find work, like meaningful work that can pay enough for you to make a living wherever you are? Will you be able to use apps that save you money? This is like a survival tool. It's very hard to be a young person living in this world without a smartphone and a data plan and all this kind of stuff, right? They might see that you have more liquid cash than they had at your age, maybe. But if you adjust for cost of living, inflation, the systems of loans and debts and so on and so forth that we have to kind of figure out how to navigate, it's a different economy these days, but it's certainly not better. As time goes on, it's worsening. And more will be siphoned off from the 90+% of us and given to that fraction of a 1% that owns most of the wealth on the planet. So the question is more like, when are we going to recognize this? When are we going to recognize that we have been wounded by the same system? When are we going to realize that we should have seen this trend all along? Are we just going to wait for the next generation? And I think there's something, I mean, we millennials were kind of like apathetic toward a lot of things. We were raised in the 90s. So the 90s was like that optimistic time where if you just follow the rules, you go to school, then you take a small loan, get some scholarships, work hard, go to university, then you will get the mortgage, you will get the nice house, you will get your nuclear family, you will be a quote successful person.
You have made it in life.
You have made it in life. Yeah. That's the ambition, and all the pop music was telling us to do it, and everything it was like a feel good time, And in the early 2000s, there were some shifts in our world. And then as the 2000s went on, we saw economies collapsing and things were changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, lucky in some ways to be amongst some millennials that were like, oh, dang, I worked hard. I graduated top of my class. I struggled, I struggled, I struggled. I studied. I did all the part time jobs to make ends meet while I was studying, I hustled. And, I'm out here. I think myself, I applied for like 70 jobs and I got calls from I think two.
Mm-hmm.
And then those were for like minimum wage jobs. And I'm like, well, do I want to move across the country to do a minimum wage job in my field, or do I just want to be a dishwasher at the restaurant, like where I am right now, because I'm a member of this community? So I chose the dishwashing, where I was for several years.
Mm-hmm.
After I have a good degree, experience in my field, like all the credentials that I was told, if you have this, you will have
A good
a
life.
good life. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily one of those people like looking for that materialism or anything, but
Mm.
materialisticness or something. But many of my peers were, and I was seeing so few of my age mates getting jobs in their field.
Mm.
And then there was the question: okay, do I figure out another scholarship or another loan and go for the graduate degree? Do I try to get some work experience as a volunteer unpaid intern for like a year or two? Do I ask my parents for some loan maybe to sponsor me to get that experience in the
Mm-hmm.
meantime? So these were the kinds of questions that everybody around me was asking. People that were super intelligent, super skilled. Um, so things didn't turn out the way we were told they were going to turn out,
Yeah.
right? And so I think people have different kinds of reactions to that. Some people are just apathetic and nihilistic. Um, okay, whatever. Let me just, go and
Mm.
party. And
Mm.
other people are angry, and there were a few of us that were angry. And so that's kind of like, in my context, that those angry ones, like it spawned the Occupy Wall Street
Mm.
resistance, against corporate rule. Um, because we were tired of corporations like determining every aspect of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
and putting us into credit card after credit card. You get another credit card to pay off that credit card. Before you know,
Mm.
you're suicidal. You feel like there's no way out. Um, Now, because the economy tanked more and more since that time,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that Gen Z is enraged.
Mm.
What I sometimes worry is who or what are you putting your anger upon, and what is that analysis? Um, and I think this is where like the whole um, intersectionality question comes in,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's great that in certain places we've made advances on the rights and lives of LGBT plus
Mm-hmm.
people and communities. Um, but the corporations had nothing to lose in, like, I'm from the U.S. In the U.S., legalizing gay marriage, for example.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, some might speculate they had something to gain from it. But there are so many other major challenges that have not been solved precisely because corporations get in the way, because it's a profit motive, and
Mm-hmm.
the politics are structured in the direction of a profit motive of the ultra rich.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those, which we will talk about in part 2 of this conversation, is gun violence.
Mm-hmm. Gun violence. Just to remind our listeners, we have an episode about intersectionality. We had this session with Sarita Paria. So you can check it on, you can scroll down a little bit and then you can see the episode and then you can learn more about intersectionality. Uh, Are you closing or am I closing?
Well, I mean, I can just say a little thing about that episode, and then you can close.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sarita works at the intersections of many things: caste, gender, sexuality, and class.
Mm-hmm.
And because the power of wealth is central to all kinds of forms of oppression.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that we can't omit, And so I think one of the things that can bring more beauty into our lives, whoever we are around the world, if we're in the working class, and even if we're not, your sense of connectivity with fellow humans depends on this as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you see people as hustling workers, people struggling to get by under this capitalism monster globalization thing, you will have more solidarity and community and care and enjoyment in your life. If you can look at somebody and the first things that come to your mind aren't necessarily about your disparities and privilege, but rather your cohesion together in a world that is where so many of our fellow human beings are afflicted by capital. You will find more beauty in others. If you put our differences in privilege before that question of how class warfare has really done a violence to our species, then things can get kind of rough, socially.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying don't talk about the disparities in our privilege, but that class consciousness is really, really, I think, central to our solidarity. Okay, over to you.
Well, we intended this to be 10 minutes, Phil, and I know it's more than that right now. But thank you for joining, and we hope we catch you on the second episode of this continuation.
Yeah, we will love your contributions to this discussion about generation.
Yeah, we're gonna call it the clash of the generations. Hi! We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers Podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast for all the latest updates, behind-the-scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.